Let's go. There's Kalan.
Israelites.
This land belongs to the Christians.
Endorsing you, and if I keep endorsing you, that proves my hypocrisy, and I can't be a hypocrite. So I had to go and investigate. It was too much for me. It was burning my heart. It's burning my soul. So I had to. Wait,
hey, buddy.
1 second.
How you doing, man? I got my man Stops.
Okay, stop. I love Stops, you know. Hey, Stops.
Sending his regards.
Hey, my brother, love you, Stops, man. Trust me.
Oh, girl, Stops says. Oh, girl? What?
Rob is being remotely controlled today by Stoltz is sitting in his.
He can't be
control
here,
room.
so he's in my ear.
Yeah. Where have you been? Because like for a whole hour and a half, I've been looking for you.
Yeah, I've been floating about here, really.
Yeah.
Because the live stream's misbehaving itself. It just keeps crashing on me. So
I jumped on your live stream. I saw you were here, like obviously on your live stream, Saracen, and I was like, okay,
Yeah,
I'm coming now.
Saracen's here.
I'm coming now.
yeah,
So
he was challenging some of the Wahhabis here, but I haven't seen him again. So.
within an hour, I got here after watching your live stream.
Sweet. So what is your topic? Because obviously Stops was very impressed with your deconstruction of Aisha's age thing.
Yes.
Because we were talking about that the other day, and we were going, what should we do in future? If a Muslim comes and says, hey, I believe she was 6 or 9,
Yeah.
okay, you believe it.
Yeah.
My thought was, I wouldn't get up on a ladder and go, hey, she was 6 or 9, given what you've said. But if they believe it,
Yeah.
are you going to challenge them on the tafsirs, in which case they'd have to give up, on the hadiths, in which case they have to give up the authenticity of the hadiths, or are you just going to challenge them on the moral issue of a child?
That's the question, though. This is what I was just about to ask you. How is this even still a question? I don't understand it. As intellectuals, you surely understand that you cannot apply judgment retrospectively, especially when knowledge has only been recently ascertained as to why it's a lot better to have sex with someone of age as opposed to someone who's underage. So where is this judgment coming from?
Okay, so yeah.
You don't want to be on the...
No. Oh, I think you wanted to hear. You wanted me to. Oh, okay. Yeah, no worries.
So based upon that, right? So I actually judge the culture based upon the cultural ideals, right? So I'm not going to look at it based upon 20th century, 21st century morals and ideals, right? I'm actually going to judge it upon their ideas of morals, right? And then when I go in there, I realize, hold on, that is a deviant behavior. Even to them, that is a deviant behavior.
That's interesting you say that. That's actually interesting you say that, because there's a number of cultures, even back when, who were practicing the same thing.
We're only speaking about the Arab culture.
No, but that's the thing. When we're talking about judgment, you have to give a comparison, and then comparison back then. So show me the comparison back then.
We can compare it back there, we can compare it now, where other cultures seem it fit to actually engage with pre-pubescent sex.
Can you give me an example?
So, for example, so you can go all the way through Africa, in Asia, they have that.
This is exactly where I was going to go. I did actually do some research on this, and even in Egypt in particular, the age that they considered was the age of coming to woman.
That's
12.
me.
And that's only, right, the minimal kind of information that we
That's
have
me.
now. 12 is still very young.
I'm just going to turn it around.
Too young. Yeah. So the question is, when we talk about, in particular, we're talking about the age of consent. We're talking about now's age of consent.
There we
in comparison
go.
to back
I'm pointing
then.
it over there.
So when we're talking about Aisha being 9 years old, and we're talking about in ancient Egypt, where people were 12, why do you draw a comparison between 12-year-olds and 9-year-olds?
Okay, so I don't think we should jump to ancient Egypt right now because you haven't presented any information.
No, of course.
You
can easily Google.
But no problem. So now we're talking about Arab culture and what the Prophet supposedly did with this 6-year-old or 9-year-old girl, right? So even in that culture itself, that would be considered deviant behavior. So we have to judge that as deviant behavior.
Can you give me an example? I'm not doubting, but can you give me an example? And can you tell me why they knew it was deviant behavior as well?
Because they didn't. Sexual intercourse only occurred once a girl had reached the age of puberty.
It wasn't the age. It was the simulation of puberty. So it was if the person looked like, not even looked, but they kind of presented the kind of aspects and symptoms of whether you were someone who could carry a child. So when we're talking about that, this is why the talk with Ali Dawah was very important. I think only 2 weeks ago, it's because he was talking about Aisha getting married to the Prophet at the age of 6, and then still waiting 3 years before he actually conceived the marriage. Right now, that's 3 years. If he was a pedophile, or if he was someone who was attracted to kids, or just wanted his way, he would have had sex with her before that, but he waited 3 years. So that is what they're using to supposedly authenticate the fact that he waited to observe whether or not she was capable of handling it. Now, whether or not I agree with that, it's not down to me because I can't apply judgment retrospectively. I'm just speaking about it academically.
Okay, so academically speaking, that's not actually correct or true.
Go on.
That he waited for the purpose of her reaching some type of sexual maturity or anything like that.
Right.
Even the hadith is false, but let's just say that is the case. He waited,
Okay.
Let's just say he waited 3 years, sorry. What was the reason that was given to why he didn't consummate the marriage?
That's weird.
You know?
Do you ask every person that consummates their marriage what their reason of
No,
consummating the marriage is?
I'm saying that the hadiths tells you the reason why he didn't
But
consummate
that's
the
the
marriage.
thing. Why is that important? Because we don't ask that of anyone else.
No,
But because
we're
it's
not, we're not asking it. We're not asking it. It actually tells you why.
So can you explain to us
So,
why?
okay, so Abu Bakr, Aisha's father said, why haven't you consummated the marriage?
Of course.
And he says, because the dowry has not been paid.
Yeah.
So that's the reason why he hasn't consummated the marriage, because the dowry has not been paid. According to Abu Bakr, according to the Prophet, that was the reason.
I'll get
So-
the sources for this, yeah?
Yeah. I can give you the sources. So it wasn't the fact that he was waiting for her to be,
According to the
mature enough.
source.
According to the source. This is like Muslim Islamic sources.
Okay.
So I'm not making something up. I can give
No,
it to
no,
you.
yeah, that's absolutely
So,
fine.
but again, if you're jumping into that, I'm saying to you, first of all, we have to look at the sources
Yeah.
before we even accept this whole claim to be true. Let's look at the sources, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
So now let's look at the sources. Does the Prophet say that he married her at 9?
Does it?
No.
No?
Nope.
Okay.
Does Aisha say that he married her at 9?
No?
Nope. So then, why are we accepting something to be the case when they themselves never said it,
Right.
the Sahabas themselves never said it, but somebody, the following generation now says, yes, this is what happened
So
at
where
9
did
years of
where
age.
did they get the misconception from?
So the misconception came later on down no, I'm not even going to say that. I'm just going to say this.
You said we have to come with facts, so you're going to have to come with
Exactly.
facts.
So I'm going to say, if I'm going to point you something, look at my video, and I'll give you my own hypothesis of why it's so. So I can give you my hypothesis why it's so, but I'm not going to tell you it is so. Does that make sense
Not
to you?
necessarily, because then you haven't quite accepted my hypothesis of whether or not, like you said in particular, you said there's a hadith that says X.
Yeah.
He did not consummate the marriage at 9, etc. Blah, blah. At the same time, is this just the limited hadiths, or are we talking about the 300,000, or is it the 30,000 hadiths that is on the, I believe it's the Sunni side? No, it's the Sunni side. So
Okay.
you've been through each individual one.
Yes.
Done the actual kind of like research that's needed in
Yes.
order to value the credibility of it.
Yes.
And have proved that anything that is related to Aisha and the age of Aisha
Yes.
can confirm that he did not marry her at 6 and he did not consummate the marriage at 9.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So my question is, when you're talking about this theoretical theory as to why, supposedly why, what makes you so much sure that that is the theory in comparison to, say, every other Muslim's theory in terms of the marriage at 6 and the thing of 9?
Okay, because I've proven it to be false already. That's number one.
Okay.
So the Islamic or the Muslim or the hadiths that they bring forth to say it's such and such,
Absolutely.
according to their own standards and criteria of what is sahih, right? It fails the criteria of something that is sahih.
So the falsality of one theory does not actually validate the validity of another theory.
Of my claim, yeah, of course it doesn't.
So you're going to have to tell
So that's
me.
why I'm saying I'm going to have to provide the evidence for you to say why my one is true. I've already proven that the 6 and 9 year old one
Yeah.
is false.
And-
that's already been proven
And
on my
according
channel.
to yourself, what age was it?
So I haven't put forward an age.
You haven't put forward an
I've
age?
said that the best argument that I've personally heard
Yeah.
is that she was roughly around 19 years of age. And how was the 19 years of age worked out?
That's
The 19 years of age was worked out was based upon Hafsa,
Yeah.
her sister, right? She was 27 years at the year of Hijri,
Brilliant.
right? And then it stated also in another hadith that Aisha was 10 years her junior.
Yeah.
So the year of Hijri, Aisha would have been 17 years of age. And then she married the Prophet with 2 years later, or 20 months later.
Okay,
So
yeah.
she would have been roughly 19 years of age.
Right.
So that's the best argument I've actually heard so far.
Right.
I haven't done a very full investigation as I've
No,
done
that's-
for the
no,
other
that's
one.
absolutely good,
So
because
I'm
I wanna do
not
that.
going to confirm it. I'm going to say that's the best I've heard
Okay.
so far, right? So now, with the other one, with Aisha being 6 or 9 years of age, we've already seen that it doesn't meet up to the criteria of Sahih. Right? It doesn't. It's not coming from Aisha. It's not coming from the Prophet. It's not coming from anybody within inside of the community. Within marriage, everybody is kind of alerted. That's the whole point of a marriage, right? To let everybody know, like, you're off limits, she's off limits.
Before it became a legal contract.
Exactly. So there's a walima, there's everything. There's nobody, her mother, her father, nobody's saying that she got married at that age, right? So why are we accepting it? Because somebody 3 generations removed from the Prophet says it. Now we're going to accept it.
If that's the case, then I can absolutely accept that for the time being until I've seen the actual citations and the documents, etc. So we'll return back to our actual argument, which is why are we looking back retrospectively, even though it's false. Right now, there's more than enough people pushing out this rhetoric that it is a problem when she was 9, etc. Now it's brilliant that you've done your own research. That's a completely different talk in itself. But now the question is, when we were talking about it, we're talking about where has this retrospective judgment come from? Not ideally from yourself, but I would say from someone like Jamie in particular, who was just here. Where has this judgment come from when you cannot intellectually, retrospectively apply judgment?
Okay, so that comes from the Islamic, or should I say the Muslim claim. I'm not even sure if it's an Islamic claim, but it's a Muslim claim. So Muslim claim is that Muhammad is the best, example for all mankind, regardless of what time frame, which generation.
Within his circumstances, you need to take that into consideration because there were certain things that had to push him to do certain things. So when they say he is the best example, he's the best example within his time, not universally throughout time.
Okay. So if that's what you're saying, then I don't have no problem with that, right? So me personally,
most Muslims don't say that, do they?
Exactly.
Whether or not they articulate it, it should be common sense and it should be an articulate person.
If you educate them that they do that, then half the arguments that we have a conversation with, we would never have anymore. Because they are claiming he's the moral example to follow in all cases, for all people, for all time.
But the question
and
is,
that's a non-starter.
Even then, just not to kind of like rally this on too much longer.
No, go for it.
When we're talking about moral, right? When we're talking about moral, can you tell me what moral aspect? And I was questioning a lot of people of this in the previous video, and they were saying that I was defending whatever, accepting whatever. No, the question is, it's the education behind why we have child sex laws. Can you tell me why we have child sex laws?
Yeah, informed consent would be my knockdown argument against everything. Any child under the age of whatever, they are not psychologically able to make an informed consent.
Women, as of like barely even 100 years ago, were able to be sold within papers. So you were able to advertise your women, right? On the newspaper to be sold because women were seen as men's property.
So
the idea of informed consent, this again did not come before the Child Act laws. There's a reason why they came in, but I'm just asking the education behind whether or not these people who are searching it with their chest, if they know why there's such a moral issue behind the child sex laws.
Which people?
Because to know whether or not Muhammad was a deviant and he was deviant with ill intentions, right? Which is the kind of like stance that some people are taking. We have to prove that there is ill intentions. Just like in law, you have to prove there is an intention.
We don't even need to go that far. Even if we were charitable and we accepted that he believed that she was of an informed consent age and she was ready and everything else, we still wouldn't accept that today. If Muhammad was alive today in 2018 and he wanted Aisha and she was alive, we would ban it and we would jail him immediately.
Of course. But the question is, would Muhammad himself accept it if he knew the information that he did now? No one questions this.
Well, we don't know. We don't know. So the answer is we don't know. But they are making it a big claim. Remember, they're making the claim.
But this is the thing. We need to prove ill intention. In order to question something in terms of its morality, we need to prove that there is ill intention that we disagree with.
That would be fine if we were saying, if they made the claim that it was only in the 7th century, and it didn't know.
It was then in his room now.
Yeah. But
so most societies were practicing underage sex. So can you please give me in a society? 1 second. Can you give, as a grown man who should have done your research, can you please give me an example of any country or any civilization that had age of consent laws? You don't know. So why speak on it then? Principle of today, and you're applying it 2,000 years back.
The first thing is
module. Yes.
okay, let me give you a count.
It's wrong. It's wrong now because we know better.
But the thing is, first of all, we haven't even established that it actually occurred.
Yeah.
So we're arguing on something that. potentially it never actually
Just
occurred.
to comment on that, I'm going to need to go away and actually do more research in order to
Yeah.
actually address you in this
Yeah.
conversation. I'm not a proud person that doesn't know anything and will continue an argument. So for me personally, I want to go away, have a look at the facts that you have, and then come with a better kind of refresh argument for that, in particular as to whether it happened or not. But in particular, what was the second point? I'm guessing you were going to talk about whether or not
my
the
second,
morality.
yeah,
or
my
whatever.
second point is that I'm not looking at it from an ethic point of view.
Yeah.
I'm looking at it from an emic point of view. Like, what exactly is the culture saying?
Yeah.
Like, is it the cultural norm for this to actually happen? And it wasn't the cultural norm for it to happen.
Okay.
It was or it wasn't?
Wasn't.
It wasn't. Oh,
Yeah. Mahabir himself was, married at the age of 25. His nephew, 21. His own daughter's 18.
What about the community though?
Yeah, there's
Do we
nobody.
know?
There's no example in the community itself that practiced that.
Oh, right.
Nobody at all.
Really?
Oh, interesting.
Nobody. And I say, I challenge everybody else to provide an evidence.
I'm
Provide
going
your
to say,
source.
personally, for me, I wouldn't necessarily assert that. I can say definitely that's a challenge,
Yeah.
and I will have a look at it because
Yeah.
in particular, I know back then the age of men in particular getting married was older. It was older. In Egyptian society, in Egyptian societies, it was 12 for girls, but it was 25 or whatever, like you said, for men in particular. There was a difference in age in particular when we're talking about
I don't know about that. You're gonna have to show something
Yeah,
for that one.
I will, 100%. So when we're talking about the difference between people getting married or whatever, are you citing? You just cited a female source, so I'm going to have to ask you obviously for more citations, etc., and then I'm going to go and find out whether or not that is true.
Yeah.
But if that is the case, then that would then prove that there is ill intent behind it and that he is leaving 100%. But until we can substantiate that, unfortunately, we're just throwing accusations in the dark and
Yeah.
we're fishing right now.
I'm just trying to throw it
No,
all out.
absolutely.
First of all, I'm trying to throw it all out.
That's
You
good.
can't even establish that it actually took place.
No,
Why are
absolutely.
we even still arguing about
Absolutely.
it? Like, it fails at the first hurdle of investigation,
Well,
for me personally.
Well, where does the accusation come from?
From somebody 3 generations down. That says,
No. The accusation now. Why is it even relevant as a talking point? Because Muslims don't talk about
They
it.
do that all the
No.
time.
Muslims talk about it in retaliation to people who bring it up.
No,
So
they did back in the day. Like on my show again, I showed sources where they argued to say no. Shafi'i, Imam Malik, all those great scholars of the past all said no. Sexual intercourse or consent, for consent for marriage, can only take place once somebody has reached the age of puberty. And generally speaking, that was around 15 years of age, minimum, right? That was usually the rough age.
Good.
There was other people who introduced it, such as Ahmed ibn Hanbal, okay, in his fiqh or his jurisprudence.
Yeah.
He introduced it and argues based upon the age of 9 because of the hadith of Aisha. But the rest of them refused to accept it. So even from way back
When
in
was
the
this
days,
talk? When was this
so
talk?
this is roughly 250 years after Hijri.
Okay.
So we're looking at like 9th century basically.
it's still quite early, yeah.
Yeah.
Before the actual.
So in Medina, that practice never took place.
Okay.
Never took place for at least that period of time.
That's good.
Never took place.
That's good. So we'll establish that information and we'll have a talk about it
Yeah.
whenever we do have the chance. Because if that is, that completely changes the whole dynamic of that discussion in general. But for me personally, when I'm talking about the talk in particular, and I'm talking about now, fair enough if you said back in the day they used to. I'm talking about addressing it right now. It's a speaking point to put Muslims in a bad light, and that is all it's used for in particular. And like you said, most of these people, like myself, can't even establish that it happened. So why are these people still using it? Obviously, like you said, they haven't checked the research. I haven't checked the research either. So my thing is, when we're talking about this whole situation, we're talking about it from the moral point of view, whether or not it did happen in particular. Because the people who do assert that it did, and are blaming Muslims for it and saying that their religion X, Y, and Z, they're none the wiser. They don't necessarily know. The Muslims definitely should know a lot more than they do because they're exposed to the religion a lot more. So my thing in particular is this talk about child sexuality and this talk about age of consent and whatever. There needs to be a much higher social awareness as to why the laws exist, who it's there to protect, and why it then turns from a moral thing, right? So a moral thing to an immoral thing, because people were getting married at certain ages. We had the Catholic Church, and they married someone at the age of 2 and 3. Doesn't mean they consummated a marrage, but they had marriages back then, and this was even back when the law said that this was illegal, right? But the Catholic Church had power to kind of like overrule that, etc. So for me personally, when we are talking about this, and we're going to talk about whether or not it's ethically right or ethically wrong, let's talk about the actual practice. Let's talk about the legislation. Let's talk about the laws. Let's talk about the situation surrounding the country at the time. Because I think it was the UK who was the first country to establish or legally establish an age of consent. And the reason at the time was brothels, it was children being sold for sex, etc., exploitation. It was all manner of different things A lot of it, however, they do attribute to the middle class basically trying to protect their daughters from being kind of impregnated by lower class, working class people who would then essentially marry into wealth, because the child would then be theirs. They would then have to obligate by the church to get married to them. And this was shocking to find out. And then later on, obviously, they developed the studies about the stunting of the brain development, etc. So when we do talk about this, let us have it right, let us have the moral on the table, let us have the facts on the table, and let's weigh up which ones in particular outweigh. Because when I do my research, if you will find that a lot of the times it's money, it's marriage, it's family ties, etc. that weigh into the argument more than it is moral and looking after the children. Because historically, we haven't cared about the rights of children. We haven't cared about the rights of women, like girls in particular. They were thrown around as chattel. They were thrown
When you
around
say
as
we,
chattel.
like, who do you mean by we?
Whoa, are you going to bring the Egyptian society into this?
No, I'm saying, who do you mean by we?
I was going to say we as a society, civilization right now. I wouldn't necessarily include Africans in particular, because the Africans are not part of this discussion, but the Middle East and the West are a part of this discussion.
Okay.
So if we're saying we, I'm saying we as in the people having this discussion.
Okay.
So do you have any objection to that?
Again, because you're saying the we thing, and I'm like, I don't know.
It's a general broad, yeah.
Yeah,
it's a general
for
broad.
me, how I was brought up, we have like, rites of passages. Like once you reach a certain age, generally around like puberty, 15 years of age, like it's only from that time period, actually, we have a rites of passage, reach about 15, then you become a man or become a woman. You have like, you're trained and educated in what it is to have those responsibilities. So, and you can only marry after you've gone through that initiation process. So when you say like, I'm like, I don't know, like my culture, I don't know, that's not part of my culture to be marrying at 12 years old or 9 years old. It was never the case. Like,
I understand, but if we're gonna get into those semantics, then we're gonna be here all day. When we say we, yes, you can bring me aside or just put a side note and be like, not all cultures, so and so. But when we're talking about we, I'm generally talking about the people within the discussion. And for what I know, Africans aren't part of this discussion anyway.
Okay.
So, yeah, I can't really comment on that. But even then, if we're talking about Africans in particular, I've just given you the source, well, not the source, but I've just given you the kind of information that there were Egyptians who got and consummated their marriage at the age of 12 and 11, etc. And even that, by nowadays standards, is still too young. It's still too young. So this idea that we need to separate everyone from the kind of discussion, yes, we don't have to vilify anyone or include anyone in this kind of like what some people would see as immoral discussion. But at the same time, it's one of those things where we need to take away the pride from this talk, because this is what leads to a lot of people feeling intense, invested and inflamed by this whole discussion. So if we take away the pride and we treat it academically and try to figure out a solution, then the talks will be a lot more cleaner. But because everyone's invested in saying my culture didn't do this, your culture did that, blah blah blah. This is why we have inflamed talks, this is why we have this, and we have less academical discussions. So I don't disagree with you, but I would take a little bit of problem with just being very semantic and nitpicky like that. But you're very welcome to disagree regardless.
Yeah, cool. Do you want to add
there's one thing that you did say earlier that I thought that maybe there's a nuance to. One was, did Muhammad know that what he was doing was wrong? And the other is, was the act itself wrong, regardless of whether Muhammad believed it to be wrong or not? And so we are judging, even if we were charitable and we said, let's either we can say we don't know, or we can say, hey, Muhammad actually thought that what he was doing was okay. He didn't know any better.
Absolutely.
The problem with that is he has an all-knowing God that is directing him with instructions, and if that's the case, then the all-knowing God should be able to tell him, oi, you shouldn't be doing this. Whichever way you look at it, I don't see it being a good argument today. Now, if a Muslim said to me, hey Rob, do you know what, he was a product of his time, he did it in the 7th century, he didn't know any better, that's what the other people were doing, although Kalam says that's not the case, we would be going, okay, no problem. But when Muslims come here and they say, no, Muhammad is the perfect example, we should follow his actions. And then that's where, obviously, and you're saying most Muslims do it, don't do it. When I speak to them, and most people do, most of them do say that. And Ali Dawah and his crew defend this, if I can say it, religiously. So
retaliate. I'll give you that. They religiously, yes, but retaliate.
Well, people come and ask them, what do you believe about this? Because they've heard people talking about it, and they come to Muslims and they go, well, what do you think? Is this true or not? And then, let's say Saracen doesn't believe it, and some other people don't believe it. Great, fine. If you don't believe it, not a problem. But then, how do you explain that? And obviously, Kalam has gone through that.
Absolutely.
Which is, so the biggest problem, I think, that many of the discussions here would be, we could part ways with if Muslims did not make the claim that Muhammad is the perfect example. Then we'd be okay. then we'd be going,
But the
okay,
thing
let's
is,
talk
I was-
about it in its time, not
Yeah.
now, because otherwise you got to cherry pick and you go, hang on, it was only, so
But
that's
here's
a
the
big
thing.
stumbling block, it seems to me.
But here is the thing: we see a lot of people as examples for nowadays. There's a lot of people I could point to right now that we see examples for that are problematic historically and would be super problematic now. For you to then say
Like,
that
give me an example.
Winston Churchill.
Okay.
How many Indians in Winston Churchill
Sure,
starved?
but-
How many people, wait, give me 2 seconds.
go on then.
What did Winston Churchill say about the Indian people and the Indian demographic, right?
Okay.
Now we have Winston Churchill where on the £5 note, we celebrate him. We
Yeah.
have movies about him.
Yes.
This is a person that
Yes.
we hold iconic to British establishment
Yes.
and British values.
Yeah.
Now, can you please tell me, where is the divorce from Winston Churchill?
Where is the?
Where is the divorce from Winston Churchill?
What
from
do you mean the
British
divorce?
establishment?
You mean
the
people
same way, the same way.
critiquing?
So the same way you want Muslims to be like it was back in then, it was back in time. He's not. It's different for then
Sure.
to now.
Yeah.
I want to see where's the British
Okay, good.
establishment done that for
So,
Winston Churchill.
a couple of things on that. One is nobody's claiming he's a prophet.
Say that again?
So nobody's claiming he's a prophet or that
There
he's.
was a few people claiming at the
Okay,
time
well, I will
that he
do-
was a
I think-
champion of God. Yes.
Well, okay, we could easily
There-
throw that out.
No. It's
You're asking me what should we do about
Go
it.
on, go on.
I will condemn anything that I think is immoral for Winston Churchill. The reason he's there is because a lot of people think that he saved Britain from World War II. So regardless of,
which he didn't.
well, that's
Russia
debatable.
did. Russia
well,
did.
that's debatable.
It's not debatable.
He
It's
was.
actually
A lot of people
historical
think he was a
fact.
good prime minister at the time of the war that helped Britain win the war.
Okay,
now you
tell
can.
me,
You
no
can.
worries. Can you tell me what significant actual kind of?
I'm not a
contribution-
historian. I'm
That's
saying
the
to a
thing.
lot of people
You can't make
believe
those
that.
assertions if you don't know. I know the history, and I'm
Okay,
telling
so
you
you're
that
saying he had nothing to do with he was a shitty president.
I'm saying that he was again a cog in the machine. He wasn't anything significant. He wasn't anything of a wow factor.
Okay, so you
In particular,
debate
when we
that.
Talk about, it's not debate. It's
Okay,
factual.
that's fine.
Okay.
Let's assume that he was just a prime minister that wasn't so good. Most people think he was. You can show how everybody's wrong. He's not a prophet, and the bad actions he did, I and anybody else that's consistent and honest will
Yeah.
call it out.
Do you?
Yes. So if
So
he
how
said
did he end
if
up on
he
the
said
£5 note?
say again.
How did he end up on the £5 note?
Well, ask the government. Again, I'm
It's not us,
assuming.
it's not us, the government. There were movements at the time to call for a different person to be put because you have a lot
That's
more.
fine.
Wait, you have a lot more influential figures such as I think it's Wilberforce, right? That you could have put on the £5 note.
Sure.
But everyone then called everyone who was calling that out politically correct. So I will ask you again, where is the British establishment's effort to divorce themselves from Winston Churchill, who is a problematic figure? The same way you are asking Muslims to divorce themselves from Muhammad's context back when. Hello.
Okay.
Answer the question.
And I'm saying to you again that I will call out any bad
No,
things.
I accept that you do. Yeah.
Okay, good.
I accept that you do.
So you're asking me to speak for the British establishment as to why they are not doing it.
Yes.
I can't do that. I'm not
That's-
speaking
that's
for the
absolutely.
British establishment. But we go back to the bigger point. Anybody else
You
that
want
you
the
bring.
Muslim to
Hang on.
disassociate themselves from the Prophet.
Yeah, well, I want them to call out the bad behaviour, which they do not do. So if they are claiming that he did X,
Okay,
Y, and
fair
Z,
enough.
then they need to call that out.
Okay.
They don't do that. That's the difference. And they say he's a prophet
But
in the sense that he had slavery, etc., etc. So
Can I-
there's a lot of those things.
Involved, or you got-
Yeah.
Well,
free,
come into
it's
the
a
live
free
stream, though,
discussion.
'cause we're streaming live. No, then don't worry.
Oh, are you streaming now?
trust in you.
Are you streaming now?
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, yeah.
I just don't
No, that's
wanna-
fine. That's fine. Yeah. So
yeah.
I can call that out. So the big
Absolutely,
difference,
absolutely.
you can't bring me any example that can compare with Muhammad because nobody today accepts anybody in British society that's a prophet, and you can call out Winston Churchill and there can be a discussion on it. So that's the thing. If they called out his bad behaviour, then they would be forced to accept that he wasn't the perfect example to follow through all time.
Absolutely.
That's the thing.
Now, for me personally, again, I think this is a good point because it highlights my earlier point about the whole intentions behind an action. So for me personally, when we talk about Muhammad again, I did say that you have to prove that there was ill intention behind his action towards Aisha. So what I've just said is basically that in Winston Churchill's time, there was no need for him to say the things that he did. There was no need for him to starve 2 million Indian people for Indian people in the famine. Now, for me personally, it's one of those things where he had the information and he had the human rights people rallying at the time to say that this is wrong.
So why did he do it?
this is
Did
a
he
wrong practice.
intentionally go, okay, I'm going to slaughter 2 million people?
He devalued the citizen, not the citizenship, but he devalued the kind of like presence of people of color in the Indian states.
Okay, so we
He didn't see them as equal.
Okay, so we can call that
give me
out,
2
sure.
seconds. Yeah, 100%. But the thing is, we had people who were equal, Indian and black in particular, who had reached places just as powerful as Winston Churchill. So he had no reason to believe that the Indian people were lesser people than anyone else. In particular, I'll give you an example. Cicero came to the UK when he was exiled a little while. You don't know about Cicero, do you?
Who?
Cicero?
I've heard the
Cicero,
name. Yeah.
Cicero is I think is an ancient Greek, Roman philosopher basically, right? And he was kind of like in the whole kind of like rise of Julius Caesar, etc. But he was exiled over here for his political kind of like dealings and his kind of stance against Julius Caesar. Now, when he came over here and he said, the British aren't even good enough to make slaves. There is not a person among them who actually can read, write, or do anything of significance, right? That's wrong. That is completely wrong for him to say. But the difference is, back then, the philosophy behind human rights hadn't escalated or hadn't excelled the way it had during Winston Churchill's time. We can say during Winston Churchill's time, there were significant movements to get equal equality for everyone who was of people of color. There were significant movements to liberate certain people who were under enslavement. There were significant movements to get the colonial empires out. So there was a significant doctrine, right? There was a significant doctrine that you could say Winston Churchill should have known better and should have known better in terms of his treatment towards
I understand
people.
that.
So what I'm trying to say is, can you show me where that rich fountain of knowledge is accessible to Muhammad?
The same thing with Winston Churchill. No, of course not. But that's not the point. That's why I said
it doesn't make it right. Don't get me wrong. It does not make it right. But the problem is, when we're talking about the intentions and the ill intentions of someone, I can prove to you that Winston Churchill had ill intentions, even though he knew better.
So
what I'm trying to say
okay,
is, Muhammad,
let me be charitable and accept that Muhammad was entirely, there was no ill intentions.
It's not really charitable. You
but
haven't really given me much
okay,
to kind of
let's say that he was entirely, it was not ill intentions.
Yeah.
That's one side of it. The other is the act itself, which you agree, the act itself today or then, if we look back and we are going to judge, we're going to judge the act.
For me personally, I don't apply retrospective judgment. I try to stick away from that because I see that historical events are very different
But
to
how
the
do we get?
comfortabilities. Give me 2 seconds. Are very different to the comfortabilities of today. So where now I have the opinion, the ability to vote, to go out to work, to earn, whatever, it's very different to someone and express my political opinion. And I feel like I have an obligation to do that. It's very different for a person who was living in medieval England or whatever, right, and had to rely on their employer, had to rely on their establishment, and had to
yes,
rely
I
on
agree.
their
It's
monarchy.
different now than then. But how did we get to now?
They couldn't speak out. They couldn't speak out back then, right? Because they would lose their job
Yes.
and they would probably be executed. But I have the difference. You see what I'm trying to say?
But how did we get to now?
For me to look back and then say, oh, he was a coward because he didn't speak up. No, it's completely different circumstance.
No, I'm not talking about a coward. I'm talking about the actions of people.
So what I'm trying to say is, when we're talking about the child sex and the age of consent and whatever, that is only a recent invention. It's a recent innovation.
Sure.
Can you show me anywhere before the 18th century that did have age of consent laws? They didn't.
No,
So what I'm trying to say is, the information has to be there for you to know that you're doing wrong. Whether we can have a philosophical agreement.
Yeah, but we keep coming back to the same point, which is there's an act that's wrong. Whether the person knew they were doing a wrong act is a different question. So you have two questions. We can say there's a question mark around whether he knew the act was wrong.
So what is wrong about the act?
The act itself.
Yeah.
I need to tell you what's wrong with having...
You do, because I'm going to hold everyone who says that it's wrong to the accountability. To the accountability that they have researched as to why the act is wrong. I know why the act is wrong, but I want to know why you.
So first and foremost, apart from the age of a young child being unable to take that well, the biggest thing for me is the psychology, the informed consent. Her brain is not at a point where she can make an informed decision about having sexual intercourse with somebody, whether she is puberty ready or not. That for me is the knockdown argument.
Can you give me an example of where in society, anywhere across the world at that time, anyone was talking about age of consent?
But I think we're covering the same ground. No, I can't, and I'm not.
But that's the thing. Human beings have grown into this knowledge.
Correct.
So what I'm trying to say is, unless you can prove that they knew this knowledge beforehand, they didn't know that what they were doing was wrong. They didn't know what they were doing was damaging to a human body.
Okay, but you could say the same about slavery.
I'll give you an example. Nowadays, since we know so much about how much children should have autonomy and they should have the right to kind of live into their adult life, why is it that we have 9-year-olds who are able, after a civil war has happened in whatever African state, they can look after their younger brother and sister? But we fail to fathom, right? We're very comfortable with that. We can see the images on Oxfam and be like, oh, that's pretty bad, but we'll go about our day. But we can't acknowledge the fact that back in the day when they didn't have any kind of like knowledge or any information at the time, that people were having sex with people who are clearly underage.
Yeah.
So the question is, now that we know that it's
Let me
wrong,
stand
no.
Sorry. Yeah.
Now that we know that it's wrong, can you explain to me what we're doing right now to challenge the rights and the freedoms of children everywhere around the world?
No, now we're on a completely separate question.
It's not because we're talking about.
The original question, though, that's Raj.
Yeah.
The original question was, you said we shouldn't look back and judge actions of people in the past.
Retrospectively, yes.
Retrospectively. But then you can make the same argument with slavery, couldn't you?
Yes, you can.
And then say, well, they thought it was right.
Well, actually, you can and you can't. You know why? I'll give you an example. America, and I love this one, America has a constitution. That constitution says that every man is born what? Finish the sentence for me, sir.
Yeah, full.
Equal.
Free, yeah.
So they knew better. They knew better.
But not everybody knew that at the time, and they only brought that in. Slavery was going on before that, right?
No. America was established before.
What, the Constitution came in before that?
Yes. After the Civil War, because obviously after they departed from the British, they then had to.
But they didn't have any slaves. Okay, so I don't know the history on when the first slaves came over. But use a different one. Just use the Arabs who did the slave trade with a lot more slaves for a lot longer.
Well,
so
actually,
I think
they did a lot less slaves
No.
for a lot longer.
No.
I can tell you so. I've researched the subject.
Well, I also looked into it. The research are on the small end, 20 million over 1,400 years, 1,000 years,
That's
whatever it
brilliant.
is, to about 200 million. So there's a huge.
Actually, no, that's false. The biggest estimates are 11 million to, that's the minimum, to 20 million, right? Americans' estimate is 14 million minimum to 28 million. That is the research statistics, not the kind of like Chinese whispers, kind of like, oh, it's this and that. No, these are the actual scholarly research numbers. And you can check it on Wikipedia if you
I will
want.
definitely do that
don't worry,
because
check
I've
on
seen
Wikipedia.
way bigger numbers for the Arab slave
Absolutely,
trade.
absolutely.
Over 1,400 years?
Over 1,400 years.
Yeah,
Now
yeah.
America only did it over 400 years.
Yeah, but the average.
So
yeah,
it means that the Americans were taking 3 times as more slaves in a shorter rate than the Arabs.
that might be
Now, the problem,
that might be true. Yeah.
The problem is, I don't condone slavery at all. It's an
The only way we can
upheaval.
say it's wrong is by looking
But-
back, right?
No, absolutely. But even when we're talking about slavery, we need to talk about it in the full, and we need to understand what kind of slavery was going on at the time. Now, America was actually very innovative. They were the first to actually make free labor, or systematic free labor, meaning that no slave was able to better their circumstances and they were much worse off just being in the plantation. You didn't have that in the Arab slave trade. In the Arab slave trade, you had slaves who then turned into rulers, and I think his name is Imris for anyone who wants to like basically look that up. So there was social mobility within the Arab slave trade. Whether it was right or wrong, I don't agree. But at the same time, where was this social mobility within the American state?
Okay, so that's again a very separate question. Remember,
It's-
you are going on to different things, which is great, and I
You
don't.
brought up slavery, so I'm just
I brought
addressing.
up
I'm
slavery
pushing.
as a
Be fair and
counterexample.
respectful.
Yeah, sure. But I brought up slavery as a counterexample.
We can go back, yeah.
To your claim that we should not look back and judge retrospectively.
Absolutely.
And I'm saying we should, and you said yes and no. So you half said yes, half said no.
No.
And then you went on to justify why slavery shouldn't have been with the US.
That's brilliant. That's good. But I'm not judging back retrospectively for knowledge that was common now and back then.
No, but I'm
So they
saying
had the information.
some people will but some people will say no, it wasn't. I disagree. It was
You
the
can
right thing
disagree.
to do,
You can
etc.
disagree. They had the information that basically said all men are born equal. That's their words. That's not mine, kind of thing. So in terms of when you say we can't judge retrospectively, you're absolutely right. I agree. You
No, I
cannot
think
judge
we should.
retrospectively. In terms of the information available, is
Okay,
what
but
I
I'm not.
said.
That's not
So
the point. It never is. Because I accept that they don't have the information you had today. I'm fully accepting that. But that's not the point, and it never is. And the only reason to judge retrospectively when people make claims that retrospectively we should use the same abilities and have the same morals today. That's the only time I'm going to look back.
I can agree, but I can agree with that. But I feel like for people in general to be able to come back and be skeptical at that point, they need to then go back and have the respect of taking in all of the context, taking in all of the history, the economics, the struggle, the suffering, whatever, surrounding that scenario. Like, as of recent, there's a lot of people who talk about communism and socialism. So for me personally, as a typical lefty, I haven't actually educated myself on the full extent of communism and socialism, etc. So what I did today, or what I did this week, is that I said to myself, I'm going to go and read up some stuff on communism or whatever. And we're talking about the USSR. A lot of people love to point at the USSR as a place for communism. I can prove to you it's not.
So
I can
what was
prove
the
to
USSR?
you the US, the Russian
What,
Communist Empire.
what about it? Sorry.
Yeah, I can prove to anyone who would assert that the USSR was a communist state,
Oh,
it is not.
okay.
And I can prove that because I've done but I've done the context and the research behind it. So what I'm trying to say is, if you're going to make assertions, do everyone a favor. Both sides, left and right, do everyone a favor. Go back, read the context, read the the kind of like circumstances of people and the conditions at the time, etc. And then learn to understand if whether or not this was something that was imminent or something that was deviant. And if it's deviant, we can call it out.
Yeah, of course.
So I absolutely agree on that.
And I think we need to be extra strict with prophets because they are supposedly getting the word from God.
There's
Other
an
men,
element.
they're
yeah,
wrong, like
I
Winston
don't-
Churchill,
yeah,
etc.,
yeah.
etc. So we've got to be, I think we've got to raise the bar when we're speaking about prophets, and that's what we're doing.
I agree.
And I wouldn't
I
be
agree. No, I
arguing this
agree.
point at all if the claim was he did it at that time, and we've learned more, we know better now.
Yeah.
But I can't make that claim because then we're going, well, hang on, wouldn't Allah have whispered in his ear, hang on, mate, this is going to be wrong, and people are going to use you as an example. So
No,
okay.
I absolutely agree with you on that instance, because there's a lot of people who would. You often get some few rotten apples, and for me in particular, it's really hard to kind of like scrutinize someone when someone is taking their message wrong. That doesn't necessarily mean that people can't say the wrong things, but when we're talking about people who do take the message wrong, right, we can look away from prophets. Let's look away from prophets, and we can look at Anders Breivik, right, who is a Christian. He's a Christian terrorist, right, and he killed 77 Norwegians. But he was inspired by what? A political activist group. So when we're talking about ridicule, we need to apply that everywhere. You can't just apply that to prophets. I understand, and I agree that there needs to be a little bit more speculation on prophets because there is almost a non-impunity there where they can't necessarily be criticized and etc. And a lot of people hold them sacred and they conduct their mannerisms around them. So I definitely agree. But I just wish there was a bit more education from the voices kind of like voicing this in particular.
Okay, I think we'll leave it there because
Yeah.
you've said something that in my world kind of says you're kind of making the point for me as well
Yeah.
about the prophets, and I think that's the main thing. If we said he was a normal guy that had some inspiration, did X, Y, and Z, we're going okay, but there's a lot of people that want to hold him to a much higher standard, and so do we. If they didn't make that claim, I wouldn't walk around here saying Winston Churchill's my prophet.
It's true, but it's the same with like say Tommy Robinson. There's a lot of people in particular who want to hold him up to a higher standard, and it's like he's not perfect.
Absolutely,
He's
I
gonna
agree.
fall. If you
Of course.
raise him up, he's gonna fall.
I will agree with
Like,
certain things
and
that
that's the
comments,
thing.
and I will call out things that I think are wrong.
But this is the problem. People tend to really, they get so lost, and this is religious history all over. In general, whether you're Jewish, Christian, or Muslim, people raise people up. Even I think the Israelis at the time, God said, please worship only myself. And the Israelis were like, well, can you kind of give us a king? And it's like, why do you want a king? You have a God. And it's like, well, we kind of need someone representative. And it's like, you have a God. So this is something that's not new to human beings. It's something that is quite synonymous throughout certain cultures. But I think that's a much further discussion away from the superficial. So other than that, yeah.
Thank you.
No worries. Thank you.
He's looking for an illustrator, yeah? Yes. Illustrator as editor as well, right? So if you've got that skill, this is what we were in the comment section, put your email, not your number, put your website, and then we'll give me a shout. How does that make you as a basically, no, I don't believe it's like 900 pages. You said the Hebrew. Religion. I mean, he has to be the same as economic. But education. What do you say? It's different races, yeah? Yeah, well, religion and monetary system. I'm not more fond of Moses. Like, to me, I'm going to say to you, look, because say there's a Muslim, so basically, that means nothing. What have you done? Okay, to them, you always in the group of knowing that Moses was the African and the Canadian side's so much nicer.
Is that on the live stream or the phone? On the Skype or on the...
That's what I say about false prophets. He's good. Whatever God is doing, whatever God's doing,
No. Okay, keep that